As the minister had explained, there is no controversy about it. National policy on education says, oh, we have professors of education here, says you start primary at 6. Policy of education now say you will have 9 years of basic education. 9 plus 6 is 15, and 3 years of secondary education, making 18. There is no problem as far as law is today. 18 years is the minimum. But the point that he was making was that, just as the minister said, we now have avalanche of people that are changing, because those of us who are guilty most are those of us who are in the education sector. We were the ones who are watching our children and so on. I can beat my chest and say it here. And of course, my witnesses are not in heaven, they are all here. So, my children, I insisted that they will not go to, of course, most of them, 3 of the 4 I had attended by Bayero University in Kano. So I insisted. Even my child, after taking A level, I asked her to start at 100 level in BUK. You are a professor Sogira and Co. You are here. You were not VC at that time, but you are still my friend at that time. So you can see. And today she was a PhD in medicine. So where are we rushing to? So the point we are making, the only point I see is that, oh, they are taking examination. At that time, they were not told. Wait, I don't need your support. I am just explaining the fact. Please listen. Let's be factual. What you are saying is that at the time they were taking the examination, they were not aware of this way. And therefore, if we want to introduce it, enforce, if we want to enforce it, not introduce, enforce it, it should be for subsequent years.
Well, but I want to remind you of just one thing. I want to remind you of one thing. Even that argument cannot stand ordinarily, because what is said, ignorance of the law is not exactly. But for practical reasons, we'll go with that.
Thank you, sir. The Honorable Minister had agreed that for this year, we will go with Unilag. That is, you know, whatever you are, you can't go to Ife. You can't go to Unilag unless you are. The highest scorer last year in Unilag was 15 years. And Unilag just said, no, we cannot take underage. And you can see the damage it's doing. We thank the Honorable Minister for conceding. And in our advert for next year, we will put it clearly. Yeah, listen now, because you will hear tomorrow that they will say it says minimum is 140 or 120 or 110. JAMB does not specify. It is this meeting that decides, and we decide that democratically. This is where we are. This is the crux of the matter. Every institution, please, Honorable Minister, allow me to read this as clearly as possible. Every institution is at liberty to determine the minimum UTME score acceptable to it for admission. Similarly, for DE, each institution will determine the number of points required by it for direct entry. Nevertheless, no institution can recommend or admit any candidate for DE with less than 2 points. That is, you know, the highest is 16. It's those who have AAA. And the lowest is 2, those who have EE. So no candidate for direct entry can be taken with less than 2, but that will not say that you must admit 2. What it means is that you will determine what you want to take as your own minimum for direct entry. In the same vein, no institution can admit or accept the transfer of any candidate for any degree program unless the candidate will spend on full time not less than 2 consecutive academic sessions in the institution. Take note, because we have seen so many fraud going on now that you call something top up. That people who have third class or HND, people who have third class and HND, and you now admit them for 3 months and you give them degree. It is saying here, you cannot award degree unless somebody has spent 2 years with you. Number 3, no institution will be allowed to recommend any candidate whose total score is below the minimum admissible score proposed by the institution and approved by the policy meeting. That is, University of Ibadan or University of Ilorin that says my score minimum is 200. Even if we agree on 140 or 110 here, you cannot admit less than what you submitted. That's what it means. Because you are free to choose your own. What we are doing here is only to upgrade, not to lower. But what we are doing here is to say, this one is too low. We will not accept. We are not bringing anybody down, as you will see on the screen. No institution will be allowed to admit. Every institution should maintain its own approved minimum. Ranking for admission will be determined by the following: UTME score, institution screening if applicable. Most of you are no longer doing UTME. I don't thank you for post UTME. I don't thank you because we are not asking you not to do it. But you have seen the reality that our scores are valid. Grading of SSCE, interview practical score, percentage allowed for UTME score cannot be less than 50%. Admission officers are to download O-level data on cards. No candidate can be considered for admission if she does not meet the prescribed minimum. Any institution interested in conducting any form of screening could do so, but the gross charge for the screening should not exceed 2,000 naira as approved by the Honorable Minister. It is not allowed for any institution to make candidates directly or indirectly incur further expenses on screening. JAMB will provide for free all institutions access to photograph, images, and fingerprint data of all candidates to curb substitution and impersonation of candidates. No institution is allowed to recapture, demand any result upload, photograph, or biometric from any candidate. Rather, the picture, the result, and biometric given supplied by JAMB should be used for the exercise. Implementation of science and arts ratio. The federal government guideline on admission mandates institutions to adhere to 60% science and 40% humanities. And for conventional universities and for specialized universities, 80% science, 20% humanities. And for polytechnics, 70% science, 30% non-technology. For federal institutions, the allotment shall be merit 45%, catchment 35%, and 20% for educationally less advantaged. Merit quota for federal and state institutions. Federal institution merit quota is 45. For all, no institution, whether private or should allow 45% merit to be less than 45%. For state institutions, the merit quota should be in 2 layers as follows. There is national merit quota, that is the first 10%. The best 10% for your state. Once you are a university or polytechnic and you apply, and people apply to you, the first 10% must be taken as merit, irrespective of where they come from. The next merit is from your state, because your state established the institution for the benefit of its own people, 35%, or whatever your state decides. Like Delta, which made it 100%. You can decide to be 60, but it should not be less than 35% of indigenes of your state. And if you like, you can say, we are not even doing indigenship. Anybody who has 45%. But under no circumstance should you refuse to take the top 10%. Because if you don't take your top 10%, the class will not be challenging to the lecturers. You will say because they don't come from your state. That should not be. Indigene merit quota for state institution is an additional 35%. If you add it to 10% national, merit comes to 45. It can be higher. Private tertiary institution, it should be as approved by their proprietors. And I said earlier on, there are institutions established by churches, mosques, and other people. Declare your interest. We have situations where students are applying that they say, I must go to church, but I'm a Muslim. And when you write to the vice chancellor saying that the policy of our university, let us advertise it that in this university, everybody who is going there must go to church. So anybody who wants to go there will apply. But now we have a case in court where JAMB had been sued for admitting them to an institution who is now imposing a religious obligation on them. There is no problem. Go and look at the Constitution. It says it clearly that nothing stops a religious or anybody from establishing an institution for the purpose of the members of that group. But it must be so clearly stated that if you are not a member of my group, you cannot. Some will say they cannot do something on a particular day and so on. Please specify it at the point of entry. Anybody who wants to come will come. So this is what we are saying. Private tertiary institutions will determine their own. If you like, say you don't want merit, say it clearly. No, the 40%, 30% that we are talking about is for public institutions. You can determine that I have an institution that says what they want is just, they don't even want anybody who score above 200 because they want people who are not good so that they can show that they are good by bringing them up. Mm-hmm. That's your problem. So, prayers that these 16-0 and 7-3 above be approved. Who is moving? Take note. About merit is about 16 is about no institution is allowed to recapture. 17 is about science and arts ratio. And it also goes on to talk about quota, that merit is 45 for federal, catchment is 35, and educationally less advantage for 20. Those are for federal institutions. For private institutions, your top 10% must be taken, whether they are from Ghana or from Ivory Coast. Then the other 35 can be from your state, and you can make it to be more than that. And you can say everything is 100%, like Delta would say. So this is what we are asking you to move to support.